moderator for today's conference. As you may all be aware, Tamil people have been continuously and intentionally annihilated for over 7 decades, which constitutes genocide. Successive Sri Lankan governments have orchestrated periodic pogroms against Tamil people, which included rape, sexual humiliation, enforced disappearances, mass murder, and torture. The massacres by the Sri Lankan government rose to a crescendo, resulting in a genocidal onslaught resulting on May 18, 2009. By then, the Sri Lankan troops had killed tens of thousands of innocent Tamil children, women, and men. This year marks 12 years since the height of the Tamil genocide that took place in Mullawaikal, northeast Sri Lanka. Estimates from the UN and independent sources list the death toll to a range from 40,000 to 75,000 innocent civilians massacred during this time. Until today, there has been no accountability or justice for the deaths of innocent Tamil people. Stability in this region will remain elusive until Tamils can live peacefully in a land free of military oppression in all aspects of their life. The ongoing genocide of the Tamil nation is aided and abetted by institutions, governments, and bodies outside the purview of the Sri Lankan state structure. The passage of time and the fact that few survivors remain who serve as reminders of indescribable brutality and torment compel a sense of urgency to solidify recognition and reaffirmation of historical truth. Today's global conference on solidarity with victims of genocide aims to educate the historical truth of various genocides in relation to the ongoing Tamil genocide. We very much look forward to witness researchers, distinguished scholars, authors, columnists, and activists from the international community present their academic and personal perspectives on genocides across the globe. In order to ensure that we are able to run today's meeting in an effective manner, we have implemented a few meeting guidelines for all attendees of today that we kindly ask that are followed. Please kindly mute your microphone if you have not already done so at the lower left corner of your screen when you are not speaking. This will be important in avoiding background noise and distractions for others. You may feel free to turn your video on for the entire conference and ensure that it is in a stable position. This will create a more direct sense of engagement with participants at today's conference. Please note that there will be a question and answer period and opportunity for discussion towards the end of the conference. And please feel free to state your questions in the chat box and which speaker in particular you would like to direct your question to. We will now like to start with a moment of silence. We kindly ask all attendees to please kindly stand. We will be observing a moment of silence to remember the heroes who sacrificed their lives for our nation, and also remember the innocent civilians across the world who lost their lives due to warfare and natural disasters. Thank you, and please be seated. So we will now begin today's conference in solidarity with victims of genocide. And our first speaker for today is Dr. Sri Ranjan, who is a human rights activist and the president of the International Council of Ilam Tamils. He has made numerous presentations on human rights violations against Tamils in many countries, i.e. Austria, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Norway, USA, and the UK. He has made presentations at the UNHRC in Geneva, highlighting the plight of the Ilam Tamils and the need for justice. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Sri Ranjan, who will be speaking on the topic of pogroms and genocide of Tamils in Sri Lanka. He'll be enumerating the pogroms and genocide that Tamils have endured for over 7 decades.
Thank you, Ruksha, for that kind introduction. I will be outlining the 7 decades of Tamil genocide by Sri Lanka in the few minutes I have available to me. And towards the end, I will also bring you a powerful eyewitness account of what happened at Mullawaikal in May 2009. So that video is about 5 minutes or so, and please bear with me at the end of the presentation. We'll move on to the video. So just to begin, I think people need to understand why Sri Lanka has become so prominent, because it's in the heart of the Indian Ocean, and most of the oil transport, everything goes to the production centers in China, and from China all the goods of course move to the west. So it is in the path of a very, very important corridor. So anybody who controls Sri Lanka has virtually the control of the Indian Ocean, and therefore the global powers are competing to have influence in Sri Lanka. And unfortunately, the Tamils are caught in this global web of intrigue and dominance in the Indian Ocean. Now, to look back at the history of Sri Lanka, the old state where it was called Ceylon had 3 different nations in this island, separately ruled independent nations, Tamil and Sinhala nations. And they were separate for over 2 millennia. Now, the Portuguese arrived in 1505 and they ruled for around 150 years, and they ruled the countries, the Tamil and Sinhala kingdom, separately. The last king, a Tamil king in Jaffna, was defeated in 1619, and then the Dutch took over from the Portuguese in 1660, and they ruled for another 150 years, close to that, and they only ruled parts of southwest and parts of north. Then the British took over in 1796, and they defeated the King of Kandy in 1805, and then brought the entire island under one rule for their administrative convenience. The British left Ceylon in 1948, and at the time, these are the territories, the yellow, marked in yellow, is predominantly Tamil lands, and then the other rest of the area was the Sinhala area. And using the numerical majority in the parliament, the Sinhalese nation began to commit genocide against the Tamil nation using their numerical superiority. Now, what is genocide? Raphael Lemkin coined the term genocide as the destruction of the national identity of the oppressed group and the imposition of the identity of the oppressor. So as I show you the next few slides, you can see over that 7 decades, this is exactly what the governments of Sri Lanka have been attempting to do. I can't possibly present everything that happened to the Tamils in the time available, but I'm going to highlight a few things. Now, starting with the first election in 1948, as soon as the British left, the first election in 1952, after the British left, one of the parties proclaimed Buddhism as the state religion. At the time the British left, it was a secular state with all 3 languages, Sinhala, Tamil, and English, as the official languages. Not to be outdone, in the next election in 1956, the Sinhala Only Act was passed, imposing the Sinhala language on the Tamils. So you can begin to see, if you deprive the language of the people, you can change them. And that's how it happened in many, many places around the world. I don't have to give you examples, but that is fundamental to the process of genocide. Now, not only the people were forced to learn the language, but they also started, the Sinhalese government also started destroying Tamil artifacts and important monuments. Now, the burning of the public library in 1981 is one such thing, which contained ancient Tamil manuscripts which were destroyed in the fire, which was actually done by the police and the government ministers. And the destruction of ancient Hindu temples continues on today, and they're building Buddhist temples in their place. So this is erasing the identity and imposing the identity of the oppressor. Now, not only the places were destroyed, pogroms were orchestrated against the Tamils in 1958, 1961, 77, and 83, and thereafter, every year after that, continuous operation for another 30 years on, and is still going on. During the war period of 30 years, there was indiscriminate aerial bombardment and use of banned cluster bombs and phosphorus bombs during 2008 and 2009. There is photographic and evidence we have collected, which is available. Unfortunately, we have no forum yet to present this and bring the government or the people perpetrators to justice. Now, all these pogroms resulted in the driving of almost 1.5 million, that is 30% of the Tamil population, from the island. And not only they were driven away, the Prevention of Terrorism Act was passed in 1971, under which the government could arrest, torture, and jail Tamils without any access to legal recourse. There are several Tamils who are missing, and they have been incarcerated for decades without charges. And we don't know what happened to them. Now, not only during the last period, but also back in 1995, overnight, 500,000 Tamils had to flee the Jaffna Peninsula to avoid the advancing Sinhala army. Similarly, again in 2008 and 2009, Tamils were driven from the Vanni area into the northeastern part of the island called Mulivaikal, and that I will show you slides of that later on. They were bombarded with multi-barrel rocket launchers and banned weapons. Now, here is the carnage. You can see that it is a civilian area that was bombed mercilessly by the government. So this massacre rose to a crescendo in 2009 at Mulivaikal. Now, all these massacres have been documented very well. For example, torture victims who went to the Freedom from Torture Clinical Services and Medical Services report indicate well documented these things in 2018. There are hundreds of thousands of mothers on street-right vigils for almost 4 years asking what happened to their children and their husbands. So no answers yet. Now, not only are these people protesting, but they are also subjected to surveillance by the army. Here you can see these guys are taking photographs, so they can be threatened. Some people are disappeared by white vans, and their bodies are dumped into lakes. Now, not only the living Tamils are under attack, here is a hero cemetery at Visuamadu back in 2007. And then soon after the end of the war in 2009, the army bulldozed the whole area and desecrated the cemetery. This is against all humanitarian norms in the world. So even Tamils are barred from mourning for their loved ones who died. Now, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 5 states, no one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel and inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. Now, this is what happened to the LTT, and not all of them LTT. Some civilians who were caught by the army at the end of the war in 2009, you can see they're being held naked and they were dumped in this place. And not only this, the University of California, Los Angeles School of Law has produced a report showing that sexual violence against men and boys in Sri Lanka and Bosnia-Herzegovina. So this kind of thing is well documented. Now, the Amnesty International put out a report saying 20 years of make-believe, and that's what it is. Sri Lanka appoints commissions after commissions, which actually blames ironically blames the Tamils. Now, the UDHR Article 7 says all are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection. That is not the case for Tamils in Sri Lanka. So Tamils can't even go to the police station because they had to communicate in Sinhala language, which they don't understand. Now, during the height of the war, the Tamils who went to the south had to register with the police. I was visiting in 2004 in Colombo. I'm a Canadian citizen. I had to register because I was Tamil in Colombo. Now, if you look at another report by Kishali Pinto Javadana, from 1963 to 2002, she analyzed all the government reports and commission reports and tabulated everything. Now, all of these commissions, inquiry in 1958 programs, 77 program, 1983 programs, nothing came out of it. All the perpetrators are set free. Now, Universal Declaration of Human Rights Article 8 says everyone has a right to an effective remedy by the competent national tribunals for acts violating the fundamental rights. This rings hollow for the Tamils. Not only is the government denying everything, they are appointing criminals who can see the picture here of Jagat Jagasurya looking at these people who surrendered, who were murdered after the white flag incident in 2009 May. He was appointed as an ambassador to Brazil to protect him. Now here is another photo of people of Iranadivu trying to go back to the island to reclaim their land. The Iranadivu island has been occupied by the Navy for over 30 years, but they managed to go to the land, the island, but they're occupying only parts of the island, but most of their homes have been taken over by the Navy for the camp. Now, if you look at another photo, this is only about 3 miles from my birthplace, and this is a satellite photo taken by the American Association for the Advancement of Science back in 2011. You can see hardly any buildings here, and soon they have built, by 2014, all of these houses have been built for permanent settlement of the Sinhalese from the south in the north, not too far from my hometown. So this is land grab by military, which is going unabated for a long time now. So genocide has been happening with impunity. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights articles have been violated by Sri Lanka, and the genocide of Tamils continues to this day. So the UN has to take action to stop the genocide. Until then, the Tamil refugees need a safe haven. Now, the last outdoor event that happened in Toronto, we have Tamil Genocide Remembrance Day events across the world. This is one of the things that happened in 2019. We could not hold one in 2020 because of the pandemic. So this is the last one in Toronto. Thousands of people participated. And we are trying to bring attention to the genocide, ongoing genocide in Sri Lanka. Now, I like to play this video of Dr. Varadaraja, who was one of the 3 doctors who continued to serve until the end of the war. And he managed to, his life was threatened because of his testimony. He managed to escape. And he gave a testimony at the Canadian Parliament Auditorium back in 2018. As a result of this testimony, the government of Canada unanimously passed a motion asking the UN to investigate alleged genocide at the UN. So I'm going to play this video for a few minutes.
Eastern province for there were more than 70,000 population. This strategic control area, the government did not selling medicine for doctors over there. So people are dying without doctors, without proper treatment. So I went to that area to start my work, even without thinking of my life. Every minute, every time, people are dying because of the government selling and bombing. So bombing, targeted by the government forces. I need to work 24 hours, 7 days, more than 250 outpatients. Every day, more than 10 casualties, deliveries, and serious medical conditions. But government always denies to selling or bombing the civilian places. They always telling they bomb the Tamil Tigers. But normally happened, they killed the Tamils, the bombing Tamil school, temples, and the hospital. So even I try to transfer the seriously injured people to the government control area to further treatment. The government always block the road. I cannot send the patient out from my hospital. I cannot get medicine inside to the normal hospital, our hospital. Government always block the road. So people are dying from the selling without medicine, without transfer to the tertiary care. The final period of the war, 2009, January, the government massive genocide by the three-way. They announced only 80,000 people are living in the war zone, but actually more than 300,000 people were there. Before 2009, all NGOs like Red Cross, UN, UNICEF, Oxfam, our record, everything says more than 300,000 population. But 2009 January, government announced only 80,000. The Sri Lankan government planned to kill more than 200,000 civilians, Tamils. At the time, I don't know why, the world was silent. The human rights organization, Red Cross, UN, all of them were silent. So Sri Lankan government, the Sri Lankan forces took advantage of that. They started to kill civilians. The world was horrible silence. So only people able to talk to media, me and other doctors. When we are talking to the media, explain the civilian population, government arrest us, don't talk to the media. If you keep talking, they will arrest you and kill you. So we can die anytime because the war we are working in the war zone, people, civilians, children, women, pregnant, everyone dying in the war zone by civilian. We can die anytime. So we never worried our life. We try to save our people. Second, they remove all foreigners from the war zone, all medias, all NGO, just before we start the war. So there are no evidence when they are killing the civilians. They call war without witness. Still we are witness, anyhow they call war without witness. They remove all medias, all NGOs, all foreign support organizations. They start to kill. Then finally they announced without thinking, without discussing anyone, the no-fire zone. The no-fire zone means there is a small village, no proper water supply, no good road, no hospitals, no any adequate facilities. They asked come to the whole civilian to the small villages. So people went because they announced a no-fire zone. People are scared to stay outside from the no-fire zone because government said it's no-fire zone, other place, not safety. So people went over there, they concentrated, more than 300,000 people concentrated in small area. Soon after that, Sri Lankan government started to use heavy weapon like artillery, multi-barrel, and banded weapon like cluster bomb, phosphorus bomb to kill the civilians. Even single cell, more than 10 people dying always in one cell. So daily, more than 100 people were killed, more than 100 casualties come to the hospital, but it's difficult to come to the hospital because roads always block. You cannot walk here and there, they're silly in the concentrated population. And the government announced 80,000 people to reduce medical supply and food supply and infrastructure facilities. When we are working in the hospital, we are not receiving any medical item from the Sri Lankan government. They deny blood bags, anesthesia, and main surgical item. In this 20th century, 21st century, we use shirt, saram, sari, bedsheet instead of cotton and gauze to do the surgery. We did auto blood transfusion, take the patient own blood and transfuse the patient. And we did surgeries with minimum amount of anesthesia. When we are doing surgery, patient is still moving and realize the pain. So after that, we manage our hospital, the patient.
So this is the testimony that was given at the parliament. And I think I will stop right there. Thank you for your support and solidarity. We'll be able to answer questions towards the end of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sri Ranjan, for presenting us with the historical truth of the pogroms and genocide that Tamils have endured for over 7 decades, along with sharing your personal experiences as well related to the Tamil genocide. We will now proceed with our next speaker. Next, we would like to humbly invite Father Alil Rajendram, who is joining us from Ulam today. Father Alil Rajendram is a Jesuit and political columnist who has a Master's of Arts in Political Science from the University of London and has been pioneering and contributing to memorialization. He's also formerly founder of Loyola Campus, country director of Jesuit Refugee Service, program director of Adeyalam, Center for Policy Research, Jaffna, co-spokesperson for the Tamil Civil Society Forum, Director Jesuit Center for Social Concern, Chairperson of the Zonal Task Force for National Consultation, Baunia, former country director of the Jesuit Refugee Service, visiting lecturer at the Eastern University Batikalo in Political Science, which also includes transitional justice. So please join me in welcoming Father Alil Rajendram, who will be speaking today on the topic of memorialization and Tamil nation building.
Thank you for the nice introduction. Vanakkam, I would like to thank the organizers for having invited me to share my reflection on the topic that I have been working on for a long time. I would not make it an academic exercise, rather a reflection based on my experience. Memorialization and Tamil nation building. The space where we organized to remember the massacre during the last phase of war, Mullivaikkal, remains an open, empty space, unlike in other countries, decorated by the tombstones or sculptures depicting the genocide or mass killings. There's a void. We suspect that the bodies buried are no more there, but the void, not quite. The air is in Mullivaikkal is heavy with stories of thousands of lives massacred in the broad daylight as the whole world watched as bystanders. To tell the stories, language remains inadequate. Never again has repeatedly become yet again the genocide of the 21st century. We still fight to mourn over our beloved ones as the space for memorialization has been banned by the state that perpetrated the genocide. There's no democratic space to cry, as the cry of the victims unheard fills the air in Mullivaikkal that remain contrary to the war narrative and humanitarian oppression discourse of the single state where witnesses have become liars. The cries of the victims and witnesses never go unheard. We still have to fight against the military to cry. All those who organize memorialization have become terrorists who would go down in the history of the record of the single state for betraying the country, portraying the activists who raise the voice against genocide as unpatriotic, who would want to take the heroes of Sri Lanka to the trial. The democracy has no space in Sri Lanka. The activists who would be listed on terrorist record would be long, and there would be many more added in the years to come. Mullivaikkal memory was built upon the collective resistance of the Elam Tamils, a collective resistance against oppression of the single state since the colonial times. The Mahavamsa historical narrative constructed the Tamils, the other, in its historiography of Sri Lanka that is exclusive based on the promise of Gautama Buddha, who seemed to have proclaimed the island as the promised land for Theravada Buddhism as per the chronicle. Mullivaikkal memory has played a significant role in shaping the Elam Tamil national identity in post-Mullivaikkal socio-political epoch as there's no group identity that exists without memory. The icon that stands to represent the Tamil liberation struggle and its continuity amidst the oppression over time and space, though it is not limited to time and space, sustained by the sacrifices made and continue to be made in search of the promised land, where freedom and liberation of the Tamils is recognized. The Tamils chose to remember the resistance defined by the Elam Tamilness that sustains the collective identity of the Elam Tamils. For Mulivaikal is not only of the past, but of the future, where the collective identity is reconstructed based on the collective experience that is unique. The Mulivaikal experience, around which collective mobilization for the continued struggle for liberation is built upon, is renewed each time when memorialized, as I quote, "How we remember affirms how we live our lives today and tomorrow, defensively or joyfully," unquote. For in Sri Lanka, the Tamils memorializing the genocide itself is a form of resistance. The government of Sri Lanka has closed the democratic space for memorialization in the north and east, while celebrating the victory of the war at the cost of violating the international human rights law and international humanitarian law, thus denying the genocide. I quote, "The shared past of a national suffering and resistance as part of the process of nation building," unquote. The Tamils seeking to foster the collective memory of collectively shared Mulivaikal should assist in the efforts of strengthening the Tamil nationhood. National amnesia of a single state with regards to the Tamil genocide further polarizes the communities while strengthening the demands of the Tamils. The right to remember is universal, that cannot be prevented, and the victims cannot be deprived of their right to mourn. The icons, symbols, rituals created to memorialize the Mulivaikal genocide manifest the everyday Tamil nationalism lived among Tamils. It is the shared memory, history, unique culture, language, and territorial integrity that makes us a nation. Mulivaikal remains a catalyst in the history for Tamils to redesign the tactics of their liberation struggle for the future. Mulivaikal also represents the collective past aimed at Tamil nation building. Mobilizing around Mulivaikal to continue the struggle would be our tribute to those who have sacrificed their lives for the Tamil cause while learning from the past and remaining attuned to the geopolitical context. Mulivaikal is our national memory that demands the mobilization of collective memories and commemorations of them for collective belonging. There's a void in the land of Mulivaikal without any monument being erected except the statue that stands next to St. Paul's Church, unlike other memoryscapes in the places that had been through genocide. Though void, but the unarticulated memories of Mulivaikal fills the void as people who had been through the brutal war stand witnesses. Though the government of Sri Lanka made them places of dark tourism, but for Tamils, the place that echoes the cry for liberation. The scattered artifacts that remind the resistance waged, for the memory is linked with power as it is inseparable from history. Mulivaikal memory will remain a bedrock of the history of resistance of the Tamils. The Tamil nation has a long history of remembering the departed, with the rituals attached. The irredeemable and untranslatable loss for liberation that keep the flame alive, for there can be no compromise made for the liberation from the oppression. Collective memory is the cultural heritage of Tamils, not succumbing to imperialism of single state. A certain awareness of the untranslatability of acts of annihilatory violence constantly accompanies our commemoration, and commemoration despite of harassment, surveillance, prevention of singular state articulates that, I quote, aftermath of genocide is not reducible to total absence of acts of genocide, as the exterminatory violence framed as genocide is beyond that which can be known, unquote, as aftermath is not restricted to those who survived. Mullivaikal's shared sense of the past by the generations would be realized an epic center of resistance. I quote, memory has power. Only when people come together in political life and transform representations of the past into matters of urgent importance, but they have been powerful agents of change, agents of transition. If collective memory is essential for mobilizing perpetrators, it also underpins attempts to commemorate genocide in its immediate aftermath and to advocate on behalf of survivors in their quest for justice. It is our hope, a never-ending hope. Thank you indeed.
Thank you very much, Father Rajendram, for joining us from Irlam and sharing your reflections and experiences regarding the Mullivaikkal genocide and also about building the Tamil nation. So thank you very much for your time today. So we will now be proceeding to our next speaker of today's conference on solidarity with victims of genocide. And it is now our honor to welcome our next speaker from London, UK for today's conference, Dr. Mong Zarni, who is a Burmese scholar and human rights activist in exile. Dr. Mong Zarni is the co-founder of Forces of Renewal Southeast Asia and fellow of the Genocide Documentation Center in Cambodia and a judge in People's Tribunal, Bremen. Please join us as we welcome Dr. Mong Zarni to speak today on how to move towards the ICC.
Thank you very much, and good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you are. Firstly, I want to express my heartfelt solidarity with our Tamil brothers and sisters who survived and who lost their loved ones by the thousands during the last phase of the war, as well as in the painful decades of genocidal persecution by the racist state of Sri Lanka. Before I get into the International Criminal Court's processes, I want to say a few things about the Bremen People's Permanent Tribunal on Sri Lanka. This was held in December 2013, so that's about 3 years or 2 years after the war ended viciously. I'm really pleased to note that the findings of the tribunal, which essentially and effectively argued that the state of Sri Lanka had committed nothing less than a genocide against Tamil people. You've heard the history very comprehensively from the professor at the start of this event. But what I wish to call your attention to is the findings have been put to use in different activist campaigns, as well as in a legal case in defense of the Tamil people in diaspora, especially specifically the case in Switzerland. You know, the Italian part of Switzerland. There was a Swiss case. The Swiss authorities tried to go after some of the uh, Tamil diaspora activists and supporters of Tamil liberation movement. And the findings from Bremen Tribunal were presented as part of the legal defense, and basically the Tamil people there won the case. But nonetheless, one particular individual I like to call attention to, Viraj Mendes, from Germany. He runs an international human rights organization out of his city, Bremen. The reason I mentioned Viraj's case was that Viraj was one of the key hosts and organizers of that Permanent People's Tribunal on Sri Lanka in 2013. And he was falsely accused of, raising money for quote unquote terrorism. And, Viraj was a Sinhalese, a Buddhist, and a Marxist scholar. And so he supported the Tamil people's struggle, and he was wrongly accused of doing some things that he did not do, raise money for any type of terrorist activity. So, but the good thing was that the Tamil people won that. And now, from the Swiss state attempting to criminalize the Tamil community's support from abroad for the struggles at home, the issue of the International Criminal Court. As you know, there are a number of international justice mechanisms. One is the International Court of Justice, that's also based in The Hague, Netherlands, like the International Criminal Court. The International Criminal Court was is a relatively more recent the creation, by the United Nations. But the International Court of Justice, where the Rohingya genocide case is proceeding, a couple of years ago, the state of Gambia brought the case against another state party, Myanmar, that signed the Genocide Convention, essentially saying that Myanmar has violated the obligations of the international or interstate binding treaty that it signed back in the 1950s. So that case is still going, but that is not a criminal case. So just in case that some of you non-legally informed individuals listening, these two courts need to be understood. Exactly what they can and they cannot do. The International Court of Justice, it's basically not a criminal court. It is a court where member states of the United Nations bring their legal dispute and get arbitrated or settled, or like a seek advisory ruling from the International Court of Justice. There's also one problem there. The problem is that we have an international justice mechanisms under the auspices of the United Nations. However, the problem is we do not have an enforcement mechanism. Yeah. So therefore, the powerful states can always shrug off, whether it's an International Criminal Court or whether it's the International Court of Justice. They can, if they want to, and if they don't care about the public relations damage or the other costs associated with ignoring even the advisory ICJ opinion. But now, onto the International the Criminal Court, the ICC, that was that came out of the Rome Statute, I believe in towards the end of 2007 or 8. The ICC is a proper criminal court. It goes after individuals like military commanders, demagogues that poison public mind and mobilizes the public to carry out atrocity crimes against targeted communities. In this case, the Elam Tamil people who sought autonomy and even outright independence. So the ICC cannot try the criminals or the accused criminals from countries that did not sign the ICC treaty. So in other words, it has a severe limitation. It can only try the politicians and demagogues and military commanders and other perpetrators of mass atrocities. If only they happen to be from the states that recognizes the ICC's jurisdiction, right? And so, in the case of Burma today, there isn't something unprecedented, legally, that the ICC prosecutors came up with. The Rohingya people, as you would know, have suffered atrocity crimes, including crimes of deportation, crimes against humanity, and of course, genocide. But the ICC isn't going after the Burmese criminals on the grounds of genocide. They're going after them on grounds of the crime of deportation. And I'll wrap it up in the next couple of minutes. They use the legal invention, intellectually speaking, although Myanmar as a state does not recognize the authority of the court, because Myanmar did not sign the Rome Statute that midwife the existence of the ICC. The Bangladesh, the country next to Burma or Myanmar, where close to 1 million Rohingya people fled, it's a signatory state. And so prosecutor came up with a very novel legal argument and sought a ruling from one of the chambers of the ICC, saying essentially the state of Myanmar committed a crime. It's like an assassin who fired a pistol or a gun, and the bullet hit the victim, and the victim fell on the soil of the signatory state. Yeah, the bullet was fired from a non-signatory state, but the victim got hit and fell on the soil of a signatory state. Therefore, ICC could, or should have the jurisdiction to go after the criminals in Myanmar. So that's the argument that has been accepted, and now ICC is in its second year of full investigation. In the next couple of years, we can see that ICC will issue indictment of individual, Burmese generals and others who may be considered most responsible. But in the case of Sri Lanka, I haven't really looked into this issue in terms of legality, jurisdiction. I think there have been attempts, as you know, if you pay attention to what is happening to Uyghur people in Shanxi, China. There have been law firms and legal researchers and human rights investigators who try to bring the Uyghurs' case to ICC, yeah, because the Uyghurs has no state that they could call their own. China has become a perpetrating the genocidal state, and so but the ICC rejected the attempt to bring the Uyghur case to ICC, right? And then so I think there are some legal obstacles for Elam Tamil people to try to bring the Tamil case to ICC. There's also another problem that may be the great power politics. my final comment as the member of the People's Tribunal, the panel of the jury or judges, was that I was assigned to look into external powers' role and possibly their complicity, particularly looked at the US and UK's role towards the end of the war. And I found, the official documents from from Britain and US, where both external powers were essentially complicit in the Sri Lanka state's genocide and war crimes against Elam Tamil people. So when you have great power, powers involved, and even to the extent of being complicit, I think they would try to frustrate or even outright block any attempts for Elam Tamil people to get justice through international mechanism. But that's not to say that the Tamil people and justice groups they should not try these international organizations, but just to caution you about unrealistic expectations and hope, because at the end of the day we have to accept rather painfully that United Nations system, either the Security Council or other constitutive justice mechanisms, they are subservient to, or they succumb to great power politics. But I'm here to lend whatever little support I can as a citizen that supports your struggle and continue attempt to get justice for your own people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mamzarni, for sorry about that. So thank you again, Dr. Mamzarni, for expressing your solidarity towards the Tamil genocide and sharing with us about the People's Tribunal and agreement and speaking to us on how to move towards the ICC. Thank you, and we really appreciate your time shared with us today. And with that, we will be going on to our next speaker for today's global conference. And our next speaker for today's conference is Kurdish Canadian human rights lawyer, Kobra Rahimi. Kobra was born and spent the first 14 years of her life at a refugee camp in southern Iraq. She came to Canada as a government-sponsored refugee in 2001. She has a degree in criminal justice from the University of Winnipeg and a Juris Doctor Law degree from the University of Manitoba. She currently practices in the areas of criminal defense and immigration refugee law. Please join us in welcoming Canadian human rights lawyer Kobra Rahimi to share her experience today on what had happened to the Kurdish people.
Hello to all of you. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm grateful to have joined this as a speaker, but I think that I can say that I'm a student to all the other speakers who have many years of experience advocating for those who don't have a voice. So thank you for this. It's a learning experience for me. I know that we have another speaker I see who is Kurdish, so I don't think I can give you sort of a proper a picture of sort of what Kurdish people have gone through, but what I can share is a little bit of my own family's or my own story. I am Kurdish from the Kurdish part of Iran, And my parents fled the Iran-Iraq war in 79, ended up in a refugee camp they lived there for about 22 years. And that's the camp that I was born along with most of my siblings. As you said, I came to Canada when I was 14. When we were living in the camp in it was in 1988 when Saddam Hussein used chemical weapons against a Kurdish town called Halabja. This is would be in northern Iraq, and that event killed over 5,000 people. And at that time, we were living in our camp in southern Iraq. And so my parents and many other families, and there were thousands of people living at this camp, were literally scared that Saddam would do the same thing because they had no protection, nobody to protect them. So when I was just I was just a baby in 1988, and my parents and these other Kurdish families dug up holes in their backyard and put their children in there in case Saddam would use chemical weapons so that they would be ready to run into the hole and protect themselves. That's not necessarily how that would be the right way to protect yourself, but in any case, that's what they knew best at the time. And so like I said, we were lucky to come here as refugees. There are people, our friends, family, thousands of other Kurdish families who ended up living at that refugee camp for like 35 years. And even till now, they live in other refugee camps. So that's sort of a little sort of snapshot of my story. But I do want to say that I've been lucky and inspired to meet members of the Tamil community here in Manitoba. I'm inspired by the work that they have done for their people. There are a few individuals who are doing amazing work to speak up for refugees. There's the genocide aspect of things, and in my view, the other genocide is when our people become refugees and they lose their children end up losing their sense of self. They don't have the rights to education, to basic human rights, to shelter, to their cultural and they don't have cultural and religious rights. And I know that there are thousands of Tamil refugees living in Indonesia, Malaysia, and other countries in that area. And whether they live in rural or urban areas, they don't have the same rights as the citizens of those countries. And so their children are growing up in these slums and in these places where they don't have basic human rights. They are not treated with respect by the majority or by police forces. They don't have the right to learn in their own language, so they don't lose their identity. They don't have rights to basic health amenities, and so I'm inspired by the work that's being done. But I do hope that we, as communities who have suffered, as communities who have large numbers of people who are still living in refugee camps, that we come together and that we become each other's voice, because I think we have a lot of shared struggle, and I don't have to be a Tamil. I don't have to be Tamil ethnically to understand what it's like to struggle as a young person as to who you are. Like it's something that I've had to work through even in my adulthood, because I didn't have the right to my culture and to my language. And so that's something that's really important to me, because it doesn't matter where we live. We have to remember who we are, and to protect our language and our culture. And we have to help each other. We have to help each other. We have to be each other's voice. again, I'm extremely thankful that I was invited to speak here, but I think I don't want to take a lot of time because I know there are other individuals who are more experienced, more knowledgeable, who are doing amazing work. And so I would leave it at that. And the only thing I will say to end this is to say to the young people who have joined today that we have to take on the torch. We have to at some point take the duty and the responsibility to do the work that our elders are doing now, because they won't be around forever. And so we have the responsibility to take on that work and not to forget the people who still live in refugee camps. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cobra Rahimi, for joining us today and also sharing your personal experience with us all regarding what had happened to the Kurdish people, but also in relation to the Tamil genocide and how you understand it, and also speaking with us on the importance of preserving culture and identity, especially among the younger generation, and how we all can jointly work together. So thank you for sharing your thoughts in a very inspiring way and sharing your time with us. Thank you. So with that, we will be moving to our next speaker of today's conference. And it is our pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Krish Govinder, who is presently a practicing attorney in South Africa, elected member of the Legal Practice Council of South Africa, member of the National Executive Committee of the National Association of Democratic Lawyers of South Africa, member of the Council of the Law Society of South Africa, member of the Bureau of the International Association of Democratic Lawyers, and vice president of Solidarity Group for Peace and Justice. He is also the former co-chairperson of the Law Society of South Africa, state attorney for province of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, and member of the Judicial Service Commission of South Africa. It is with great honor that we welcome Mr. Krish Govinder to speak to us today on the topic of how ANC mobilized international support against apartheid in South Africa.
Vanakkam, Program Director, and greetings to everybody on this very esteemed panel. I think just to tell your previous speaker, Cobra, we are all students of struggle and students of trying to find solutions. So we are all together. I want to also thank the hosts, the ISET and the leadership for inviting the Solidarity Group for Peace and Justice from South Africa, and hope that we would be able to build on all the relationships we have had in the past and in terms of the struggle still ongoing and going forward. I want to also mention that it would not be fair for us not to reflect a little bit about the struggle of the Palestinian people, which is at the moment raging in the same genocidal manner that the Tamil people in Jaffna experienced on Mullaiwaikul itself. It's very significant. They are undergoing the same type of attacks by an advanced and very sophisticated army using modern weapons, destructive weapons, artillery, modern aircraft against a defenseless population who are fighting back with what would appear to be a few types of rockets which are not sophisticated enough to cause any serious threat, but minimal damage to the people within Israel, but it's causing such a disproportionate counter attack, clearly designed to annihilate and reduce the population to a state of helplessness and to destroy infrastructure and to render the people totally impotent to pick up the pieces. And this struggle is still ongoing. And I'm sure all of us in all our solidarity groups are sharing concern, and we are also equally feeling the pain that the people at Mulevaikel experienced firsthand, and which we have recorded as our president of ISET has given all the facts and details with the pictures. This is almost identical to what we are seeing. It's a living experience of genocide going on as we are speaking, as it has been happening for the past week in the midst of important celebrations, holy days, and so on. So you have the same type of callous oppressor with no sensitivity to any rights of individuals or groups, or even the oppressed people. And they're no different from the Sinhalese leadership that controls the island and of Sri Lanka. And it is an eye-opener for us because the world is watching. And I'm highlighting these issues because we have, from 2009, turned to the United Nations for some kind of help, to try to put some pressure on the people, the leadership of the Sinhalese government, and to try to find a sense of accountability for the acts of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity that were committed at Mulevaikel and from the 80s and the 70s and going into the early 2000s, as it's been documented, and I'm not here to repeat the details and those dates. It's the same with the Palestinian struggle. And it was the same with the struggle of the people of South Africa under the leadership of the ANC. There are parallels, and I must say the one important thread that links everything together is that the United Nations did not resolve any of the problems. And if we have to take the living experience of South Africa, the United Nations had at best passed a resolution that imposed sanctions, and that was the selling of arms to the South African apartheid regime. But that was the furthest. Most of the countries that are still in the same system that operates within the United Nations are all together as the superpower club that protects their particular economic interests and their political interests. And only when there is a threat to their own economic or political interests will they look at smaller nations or those who look and turn to them for help to see how best they can mobilize support for their own interests and to protect the economic interests. And then you will find there will be some assistance from the UN. Now, I'm wanting to make this point that the UN is not useless. It must not be seen to be of no value. It is the governing body of the world without any powers. Let us just be very clear. It is a voluntary, almost a voluntary association of people who may come together either voting or in making statements at the UN, but there is no force. The UN doesn't have an army to enforce any of its resolutions. It doesn't have any collective group. If they have to mobilize troops, it's only for peacekeeping. Peacekeeping after the war or after the genocide or after the oppressive acts have been concluded. And that too, we have seen they've not been able to do it very well. There have been serious criticisms of peacekeeping forces who have become perpetrators as well of crimes under the leadership or wearing the colors of the United Nations. But that is another story for another day. But the important point I want to make is that it is important to keep the voice of the Tamil struggle and the people alive on the international platform. But the little that is being done and that can be done through the UN Human Rights Council, HRC in Geneva, is almost a cat and mouse game that goes on, and it has started more seriously in 2009. And by the year 2015, there were certain resolutions taken. If I'm not mistaken, it was resolution 30. And last year, there was a resolution 43. All of them make promises. And let's be very clear. The Sri Lankan leadership and the people are sophisticated, clever operators. They know all the rules that govern the UN. They are masters in understanding geopolitics and the challenges that the superpowers face and how they confront each other and how they compromise with each other. And of course, the power of the veto in the Security Council, where you would have no collective vote. You need all the superpowers to get together to agree on something before they would even decide on what would be the least would be sanctions. So it's important to have a voice there and to raise all the issues that we have raised and continue to raise. And all the great inputs we have heard today and we have heard previously are important material that will serve for debates. So I want to say that when the ANC embarked on its struggle for liberation in a true sense from about 1960, when they decided to take on the armed struggle, and that was a similar process that the Tamil people went through on the island when they started mobilizing, protesting peacefully, taking petitions. The ANC went through the same process from 1912. It came right through till about 1940, when the leadership of the ANC was seen to be begging cap in hand to the colonial masters, who were the British at the time. And the ANC, being the nationalist body that it was in South Africa, underwent a change, and there was the youth, the younger leadership that took over under people like Nelson Mandela and others who came through with Oliver Tambo, and they took on what was the struggle and shifted it to a higher level and adopted the armed struggle. The LTT came into being in an almost similar fashion. And because of the conduct of the Sri Lankan government and the manner in which they embarked on terror against peaceful protest and drove people into armed struggle because they offered them no solution, no peaceful solution. We have seen the end of the armed struggle in Sri Lanka in 2009, but the ANC did not succeed in the armed struggle. Let us also be clear about that. But they reached a point which allowed them to negotiate a shift in power because the minority government in South Africa was crippled economically. I emphasize that. if it were not for the economic crippling of the South African apartheid regime, no ANC would have ever succeeded. And that economic crippling of the apartheid regime came through a sophisticated and a broad-ranging process of strategy and tactics. One of the strategies was to take the struggle also to the UN, and I'm not going to labor that. They were able to keep their voice alive in the UN. They gained international respectability at the UN, and they got countries that also supported them regularly at the UN. And of course, we had the Soviet bloc, which doesn't exist anymore, but they were part of the big support base of the ANC and the East European countries. Then there were sympathetic countries like Sweden and Norway, and of course, countries in Africa, and some of the progressive countries in Europe, and there were very few. But the Western world weren't supporting national liberation. However, that's the UN, and the ANC was able to keep its voice alive there. But within South Africa, the ANC was able to keep its roots firmly on the ground, mobilizing the people on the ground who were able to maintain resistance through unions, that is the worker unions, cultural bodies, all the religious groups. They worked on a non-racial platform and a non-sectarian base. So you had Christian, Jews, Muslims, and Hindus, whoever of all faiths, and communists, all working together to put an end and bring an end to apartheid. Then, of course, we didn't really have a diaspora. It was exiles who were out there all over the world, who were driven out of South Africa. But the difference with the Tamil diaspora is that the Tamil diaspora, as we know, has been scattered all over the world. And it's largely people who faced repression and had to escape, and many others who also just had to leave, like there were many South Africans, just to find a better place to live on earth and any part of the world that would welcome them. They became experts wherever they went, whether it was in Britain, Canada, Europe, France, parts of Germany, all over, and Australia. And of course, there were also many that moved to India as well in the Tamil Nadu state. So many of the people who moved out into the Western world and elsewhere were able to find new homes. They were able to succeed professionally. They, I would think, are also citizens of their countries and have settled down with we'll call it a dual nationality, with their roots in the Tamil North and in their country of birth. So what I am wanting to draw is a simple thing. We are always meeting annually to recognize and we honor the martyrs at Muley Baikal and all who have died before that and who are even dying daily in Jaffna and in the Tamil areas of Ilam. And we want to see self-determination or a solution based either on some federal system, and we have to find ways to enforce this process in order to get this issue put on the table inside the island. So what we have to do is to consolidate the solidarity that we have. On the one hand, first, there is a limited work that we are doing in the United Nations and the UNHRC. But more importantly, I think we are building solidarity with other groups. So it's great that we are able to share in solidarity with the Kurdish people, with the Palestinian people, and people who are struggling in Western Sahara, all of these places where there are fights for self-determination, even Yemen. I know the Tamil people in Europe in particular have been working together with these groups, and we must encourage solidarity, because these programs of solidarity, action, give hope, and they strengthen us going forward. The more important thing is we have to find a way of dealing with the Sri Lankan regime. Now, we can't deal with it in armed struggle anymore. That is an end, in my humble opinion. But there's an economic program. And I would just ask that we must look at the boycott, disinvestment, and strategy. And sanctions may come very late, but boycotting products. I would like to see, instead of me coming back next year for another commemorative conference, that we would be able to say we have embarked on boycotting 4 or 3 products from Sri Lanka. And we've spread this all around the world, and we've given information to our comrades and to the people whom we interact with, whether it's in New York, London, or Toronto, or in Geneva, or wherever we have a base, that people are being asked to stop buying X products. And just to identify 2 or 3, whether it's the tea, and don't let me hear the argument, please, that this will impoverish our own people in Sri Lanka. When they face death and genocide, the options are nothing there to even worry about. They said the same things when we fought that we want sanctions and boycott of South Africa's oranges, South Africa's wines, South Africa's products that went out overseas that were always looked forward to, the citrus fruit. And we said, people were saying, but the workers in the farms on these fields and all them who work in the factories, they will be without a job. We said, well, let's see what happens. We are prepared to die here, and we are prepared to lose jobs, but we want to cripple this economy. And that is how we fought the sanctions, boycott, and disinvestment campaign. Let me assure you, won our struggle almost 90%. So I just want us to say that if we don't start developing that, and you can only do it because the ANC had unity around the world, the diaspora was united, and they were able to embark on common strategies and tactics. You cannot have common strategies and tactics if you have 4 or 5 or 6 different organizations all over the world. Even today, there are 4 or 5 organizations in the next week who will be commemorating different Mullai programs. This the ANC never had. You never had 5 different days with 5 different liberation movements from South Africa commemorating Sharpeville or other massacres in South Africa. We had only one organization that was able to bring all of the people together under a united program. And the sooner our diaspora is united, the sooner will we see some success moving forward in a new struggle that we have to take into account. The new struggle will bring in the youth in the Tamil diaspora. It will bring in the use of science, technology, artificial intelligence, all the modern technology of social media. And it will bring in people with talent and gifts that will give direction to a movement going forward that will bring some hope going on into the future. I shall stop there. I apologize. I may have taken too long, but thank you very much. And Vanakkam and greetings from the Solidarity Group for Peace and Justice from our leadership in South Africa, our General Secretary, Pregs Padyachi, and we hope that we would be able to develop programs. We are not resting. In South Africa, we want to bring a conference of diaspora organizations with the youth at some level. We are talking to our government. We are going through some difficulties at the moment, including the issues with COVID, but the issue is still close to our hearts, and we are in touch with people in government for the purposes of starting something as well from our side in South Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Krish Govinder, for educating us all today on how ANC mobilized international support against apartheid in South Africa in relation to other genocides in the world, as well as expressing solidarity, and how we can, as a community, work with United Nations to ensure such tragedies are never repeated and support long-term peace, justice, accountability, and reconciliation. And thank you also for especially highlighting the importance of working with diaspora youth as well. So thank you for sharing your time with us. And with that, we will now be proceeding to our next speaker. It is now our honor to introduce our next speaker, who is joining us from Germany. Our next speaker is Rohingya activist, Mr. Nay San Luen, who is joining us from Germany. And for the past 20 years since his departure from Myanmar, Mr. Nay San Luen has been documenting human rights violations and the military campaigns of the Tatmadaw in Arakan state of Myanmar. He is a prolific commentator on Rohingya issues on radio, television channels, and other mainstream media outlets. He views his prime role as a passionate campaigner, providing an up-to-date information service, verification, and fact-checking, including situation updates and analyses. His work entails voluntarily advising and providing information to various governments, human rights organizations, United Nations staff, journalists, and others in order to assist their efforts to bring focus on the Rohingya and Myanmar's genocidal strategies. Nay San Luen was publicly attacked by the Myanmar Presidential Office and State Councillor's Office for his role in getting out news about military atrocities in northern Arakan state. He was born in Guthadong and raised in Rangoon. His parents were civil servants in Myanmar. His grandfathers were high-ranking officers in Guthadong Township, Arakan state. His great-grandfather, Mr. Abdul Zolil, was officially recognized as an indigenous person in Burma. Now, please join me in welcoming our next speaker, Mr. Nay San Luen, to speak today on the topic of Myanmar, and Rohingya coup.
Thank you so much. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, firstly, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me to speak in this panel. And I joined the demonstration in Düsseldorf, conference in Essen, and I was also in Bremen with my Burmese brother, Dr. Zani, who spoke earlier in 2013. And today I am here to talk about the military coup in Myanmar and Rohingya genocide. But I joined this panel as to show my heartfelt solidarity with Elan Tamil people, my prayer for the fallen hero from Elan Tamil community. And until 1st February of this year, I focused on the Rohingya issue only, but nowadays the Myanmar issue became a primary focus for me. The coup in Myanmar is no surprise for me. Anyone following the Myanmar issue can expect this would happen anytime, because the country has been ruling with the constitution designed in 2008 by the military. It is very sad to see Myanmar became a killing field again after almost 4 years after mass slaughter of Rohingya people in the pretext of so-called clearance operation in late 2017. In 3.5 months time, since 1st February, almost 800 civilian protesters, including as young as 7 years old, were brutally killed by the military despite international concern and pressure. Over 5,000 arrested and about 4,000 are still in detention. Some were sentenced to 3 to 7 years. Some were sentenced to death. About 1,700 have been evaded arrest warrant. Myanmar has been under military dictatorship for almost 60 years. This is not the first time the military overthrew the civilian government or took power to control and repress the people. This is the third time since 1962. The military has been slaughtering ethnic minority, including Rohingya, since they took power in 1962. The member of the ethnic minority in the country know very well about the brutality of this military, but the majority of the people didn't experience like we did. The same military is now committing crime against humanity against the entire population across the country. The majority of the people have now realized how the ethnic minority have suffered in the past. They didn't believe our outcries. They believe now at the same military at their doors. I wish this never happened to anyone. The persecution of Rohingya have been the persecution the Rohingya have been facing more than 40 years is now being faced by the people in the whole country. We have been facing all kind of persecution, such as extortion, harassment, arbitrary arrest, and all form of torture. All the people in Myanmar are now suffering the same. Kim Yoche, a 7 years old girl who was the youngest known victim, was shot dead by the police while she ran toward her father during a raid on their home in Mandalay. The last one she said was, I quote, "I can't, father, it is too painful." The family had to hold a secret funeral as the regime was trying to take her body away. Another young man at 18 years old in Bago was also shot dead by the military. During his funeral, the military and police came into the cemetery and indiscriminately shot at the funeral attendees. At least 40 attendees were abducted. Their fate are unknown to anyone until now. I believe all of you know about a young woman named Chasing or Angel from Mandalay who wore an "everything will be okay" t-shirt on the day she was shot in the head. Her body was removed from the tomb, examined, returned, and sealed by the authority. These are just a few examples of the brutality of this military regime. You may remember how Rohingya were brutally slaughtered in 2016 and 2017 in the pretext of so-called clearance operation. I went to Rohingya refugee camp in Bangladesh a few times and met survivors. I met the women who were brutally raped by Burmese military. Rohingya were completely unprotected. As of now, no one is protected in Myanmar. People are in fear. Anyone can expect the killing, torture, abduction, or harassment, even by living inside the house. There are many terrorists around the world. They disturb the people in certain area. I mean, the area they occupy. The military in Myanmar has no limitation. They are terrorizing the people in every village, town, and city. The military have launched airstrike in Karen State, Kachin State, and as of today in Chin State. Thousands of internally displaced refugees had to flee to Thailand and India to seek refuge, but unfortunately, many were pushed back and the border were sealed off. Military is using all cut strategies against them. They are now trapped. The small children are on the run. they need to move one place to another within the area to survive. In regard to Rohingya, 600,000 Rohingya in Rakhine State are confined to the camp and open air prison. We are very much afraid that the military will launch another round of violence against them anytime soon. As the military chief May Aung Hlaing said, the Rohingya crisis is unfinished business from World War II. So most of the civil servants in Myanmar have joined the civil disobedience movement. The regime has been abducting civil servants who have joined this movement. The participants of the movement were forced to leave from staff housing, and they are suspended. Like thousands of civil servants were recently suspended from their job. Yet the participants have shown there is strong commitment to bring the change in the country. They must be supported. This is the main struggle to dysfunction all mechanisms of the region. Last month, the shadow government called National Unity Government was formed. The world need to recognize this government as legitimate one, not the military regime. In my conclusion, I would like to highlight that my country, Myanmar, is changing. People are willing to bring the change. Younger generation, especially Generation Z, are proactively involved in the changing process. I'm very much expecting that we won't change, we won't face the discrimination that we faced in the past. Surprisingly, the Rohingya, my people, were considered by the majority of the people that Rohingya are not a part of Myanmar. We have received public apology from hundreds of individuals and also organizationally. I'm glad that they have realized the propaganda that they believe in the past was false. I would like to urge all of you, please support as much as you can to bring a brand new federalism with human rights for all, equality for all, and justice for all in Myanmar. And we pray for Elam Tamil people to be free from oppression. We will always support whatever we can for your struggle and justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ni San Win, for joining us today and educating us on the Myanmar and Rohingya coup and how it relates to other genocides across the world, as well as expressing your solidarity with the Tamil genocide. So thank you very much for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us as well. And with that, we will be moving on to our last speaker for today's global conference on solidarity with victims of genocide. And our last speaker is Ms. Niloufar Koch. Ms. Niloufar Koch, born in Ardahan, Northern Kurdistan, is a member of the Executive Council and spokesperson for the Commission on Foreign Relations of the Kurdistan National Congress. Joining us today from France, her current primary political focus is the improvement of national dialogue amongst political parties and civil society organizations in Kurdistan. She spent most of the period from 2013 to 2018 in southern Kurdistan, Iraq, and Rojava, northeast Syria. Parallel to national unity efforts, Ms. Koch is also active in the international arena in raising awareness of the right to self-determination for the Kurdish people and all ethnic and religious components of Kurdistan, and she is interested and engaged in the active and autonomous participation of women in all fields of society and politics. Since 2011, Ms. Koch has been working with Kurdish women as well as on the international level for the international legal and political recognition of femicide and feminicide as genocide. Ms. Koch came to Germany in 1976 as a child of Kurdish migrant workers and studied biology and political science at the University of Bremen. Today, Ms. Nilüfer Koç will be speaking about the Kurdish struggle and the present situation and the way forward. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you, Ruksha. Thank you for having me. First of all, I would like to commemorate all the heroic women and men of the Tamil people who sacrificed their life for defending of their people. The genocide of the Tamil people is still on the agenda of the Kurdish movement because we are facing same threat now. We have been very busy to understand the backgrounds of the genocide and why the international community was doing nothing to prevent the genocide against the Tamil people. I personally was following the Tamil freedom movement through my close friend Viraj Mendes in Bremen. When I was studying, we have done a lot of activity of solidarity. And today, solidarity means to me that we oppressed people who are threatened for genocides, the solidarity means to learn from each other, from sharing the experiences. That's why I think the conference we have organized is very important contribution to create joint platforms where we can share our experiences. Of course, the situation of the Kurdish people is a little bit different than the one of the Tamil people and also from Myanmar of the Rohingya people, since we are based in a very central area of the world, which is the Middle East, and currently the center of the Third World War. We say clearly the things what are happening in Syria, in Libya, in Yemen, in Turkey, in Iran, are also partial parts of the Third World War, which means that the global powers are going to, again, redesigning the area after 100 years. And we say this period of redesigning the area means creating new nation states. It's offering us oppressed people, not just us as Kurds, also other components of the region. It's offering us opportunity to improve our own alternative. Since we have seen that most of the nation states are now collapsing, we are seeing this clearly in Turkey and Iran, and we have seen this in Syria and in Iraq. We can't just say that all these regimes were corrupt, that's why they are failing. No, I think the whole system, which was the reason for building the nation states, Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria, where the European capitalism. Building the nation states to control a very ancient area of the world, the Middle Eastern region. Now all the states are collapsing. One of the most threatened, by collapse threatened state is the Turkish state, which was its continuation of the Ottoman Empire. Actually, when Turkey was built with the support of France and Britain in 1923, they were given the right to exist, and for their existence to clear all the obstacles, means cleaning the Armenians, which caused the genocide of 1.5 million Armenians in 1915. But the genocide against the Kurdish people is continuing until today. Turkish nation state was built on racism, with about denial of all non-Turks and all those who are non-Muslims. Because in the Turkish constitution, the Article 2 is saying this state belongs to the Turks. The only official recognized language is Turkish. All others, like Kurdish, Arabic, Armenian, Greek, are forbidden in Turkey, particularly the Kurdish, because when the British and France were sharing the former territory of Ottoman Empire, they have given the biggest part of the Kurdish land to Turkey. Nearly 45% of the Kurdish land was given to Turkey in 1923. And Turkey was giving the green light whenever the Kurds became obstacle to Turkey, the Kurdish uprisings. Turkey has the right to kill the Kurds. The existence of 50 million people of the Kurds were created as a problem. So that means whenever there was uprising against the Turkish colonialism or the Iranian colonialism or the Arab colonialism of Syria and Iraq, the global states of the European Union, part of today's European Union, they were benefiting from this conflict, the conflict between Turks and Kurds, the conflict between Kurds and Arabs. So these states were benefiting from this construction of the Kurdish, what is called as Kurdish problem. Still, this problem is continuing. So even now, when the US and other NATO members are going to share the land or dividing states like they have done in 2003 in Iraq and now doing in Libya, in Yemen, and in other parts of Middle East, the main aim is to get the region under better control. They have difficulties to reform the states which they built it, like the Turkish Republic, since the Kurds have seen also the collapse of the Soviet Union, the vacuum of politics in Middle East, because until 1990 there was somehow a deal between the Warsaw and NATO Pact about the region, but then after the collapse of the Soviet Union, a big vacuum came up in politics. And this was offering the Kurds to start a new organized uprising, which led to several rebellions, particularly in the Turkish part of Kurdistan, which is the biggest part, in where 25 million Kurds are living. And second part was Iraqi Kurdistan. The third part of Kurdistan is Iraqi Kurdistan. The Kurds start to with the uprisings. Until 2003, the Kurds in Iraq gained then the federal status now. And after the Arabic Spring, when it spread to Syria, the Kurds start to take the opportunity to create new alternative democratic system in North and East Syria when Syria was attacked by the European and the US states. Since then, since 2011 until today, the Kurds have achieved two parts which were formerly occupied by the Arabs, Syria and Iraq, to create a kind of self-administration. This is now seen by Turkey as an obstacle because now Turkey is becoming a neighbor to two Kurdish autonomies in Syria and Iraq. That's why Turkey is, since 2011, attempting a political of genocide against the Kurdish people and getting support from particularly NATO member states, since Turkey is the only Islamic NATO state member state in Middle East. So still the US and also the European countries are encouraging Turkey by committing the suicides because they want to keep Turkey as a wall against the Russian expansion in the region and also against Iranian expansion in the region. So there is from globally war between the Atlantic and the states from part of Asia, which includes also Iran. However, Russia is described as European country, but we say the 21st century is a clash between Atlantic and Asia, and Middle East is in the mid of both of these blocks. And Kurdistan is the center. The four parts of Kurdistan are in the center of between these two blocks. So Turkey is giving green light not to allow any changes in the region, any changes in the map which was drawn 100 years ago. That's why recently, when Turkey started a new military operation against the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK in northern Iraq, the aim is, like they have done in Sri Lanka, by defeating Tamil Tigers as a leading power of the Tamil people, then committing genocide. So the same is now, we are facing the same problem now by attacking the PKK, defeating the PKK militarily will open the way for Turkish genocide against the Kurdish people. So the NATO is keeping blind eye for Turkish genocidal goals, since they need Turkey for more global hegemonial interest in Middle East. So for that, it is important to us, firstly, to mobilize our people, because I do believe personally, when you want to be successful in diplomatic arena or in the UN, wherever you are applying for rights, first of the thing is important to organize your people. So we are investing most of our energy to organize our people, to mobilize our people in Turkey, in Iraq, in Syria, in the diaspora. So we have 2 million Kurds in Europe, in Russia, in Canada, everywhere. And this is the main focus, the organization, mobilization of the people, because you need pillars of power. Our primarily power is the organized mass movement. The second one, what we need is, because we are in a center of war zone, which is the Middle East, you need a very, very good organized self-defense. However, one of the speakers from South Africa said the time of armed struggle is over. Might be that can be said to South Africa, but when they started the revolution, they also got trained military arms, military organization. Then there was no need after '94, but people in like ours, like we and the Tamil people, we are threatened people, and the regimes who are occupying our land, the colonial powers, they have no sense of political dialogue. So if there would be a Turkish government which will be able to discuss, to agree with us for a political solution to the Kurdish problem, then there wouldn't be a need to having a powerful organized self-defense. And we have seen the new army which was created for division of the region, the so-called Islamic State. If there wouldn't be a very well organized Kurdish defense forces in Syria, in Iraq, and in Turkey, you can't imagine what would happen to the region when the Islamic State was going to create 2 capitals, one in Iraq, one in Syria. It could become a very big global threat. So the Kurds, when without their army, without defense forces, there is no option for us to survive. None of us is loving armed struggle, but for our survival against any commitment of genocides, we have to be very organized, very powerful, organized self-defense, because not all the problems can be solved by political manners, since the regimes which are colonizing us or oppressing us don't have any understanding of politics and peaceful manners. I think the main achievement of the Kurdish movement was to understand that there is no need for independent Kurdish state. So creating a solution, alternative, which can be find also positive resonance in international politics, but also accepted by the people itself on the ground. So in Syria, we made the experience creating a model of democracy which includes all the components. I think also for the Tamil people, it's important to have support for the people of whole Sri Lanka. So what we are trying to do, getting support from the Arabs in Syria, the Armenians in Syria, the Assyrians in Syria, the Turkmens and the Chechens. Since Syria is a multi-ethnic country, we can't just think of we can't just think and take care for ours. We need to bring the people together. The same we are doing in Turkey with the Turkish people, and also in Iraq and Iran. So it is important for us to create a strength of people. So creating models which are inclusive. That's what was important for us to rethink the idea of having Kurdish nation state, which was given up by the Kurdish people's leader Abdullah Öcalan, who was abducted in 1999 and is since then he is imprisoned in Turkey in solitary confinement. He was creating the idea there's a vacuum in this century Middle East. So this vacuum means that it offers us opportunities to create the model of people, and not just looking on the power-based centers. So that's why we have gained strength together with the people of Syria. Otherwise, it wouldn't be, we could not achieve to survive against the Islamic State when it was backed by Turkey. Still, Turkey is using them as mercenaries, as proxies, and some other states also. Because we kept together with the Arabs, the Kurds and the Arabs in Syria kept together, we could prevent the expansion of the Islamic State in Syria. And also the same example, with the same experience we made in Iraqi Kurdistan. That's why I think for the Tamil people is important also to get the support of the Sinhalese people in Sri Lanka, trying to build up coalitions with them. And for that purpose, we need to overcome ourselves as revolutionary movements from any kind of nationalism. This is very vital to us because the states are using nationalism as a Damocles sword to divide the people and use the people against each other. We made this experience in the past century in Middle East, with very sad experiences. So the Armenian genocide could happen because firstly the British were creating artificial conflicts between the Armenians and the Kurds, between the Armenians and the Assyrians. So splitting the people means dividing the power of the people. I personally do believe this century is important for us because we see that the states are acting against the people and particularly against the organized people. And the Tamil people were very well organized, and that's why 30 states supported Sri Lanka to defeat the Tamil tigers and the Tamil people. Now we are experiencing the same since the Kurds became a political actor because they are well organized. So the NATO states are supporting Turkey to defeat this power of mobilization of the Kurdish people because they see the strength of the people as their organized structures. And I think now is the right time also for the Tamil people again to come together and looking for solidarity with other oppressed people. And that's why I think the idea of the Kurdish people's leader, Abdullah Öcalan, saying we need a new platform of people of word, since the United Nations became really United States. It's no more United Nations, so they don't take care of nations. What we are seeing now in Burma and Myanmar, many people have lost their life in the last, since February and this time, but nobody's taking care. And Turkey is committing war crimes in Syria and in Iraq, in Turkey, but the UN is keeping blind eye on this. So that's why we need a new platform where the people can come together and show in solidarity their strength, their power, and that will force the states to rethink that the people can resist. And I think this is the experience we made in Middle East. We therefore are focused to bring all the people together because we said the history of the states is not longer than the history of the people. Particularly in our region, we are the ancient people of the region. We, the Kurds, the Arabs, the Persians, the Armenians, the Assyrians, we survived many empires, we survived many states. We have experience of survivals and we have experience of uprisings. Now is the time that we come together, and I think when we are together, then the UN will pass bills or resolution according to our benefits. Unless, without being organized, nobody would listen to us. I think this is the thing that we learned from the genocide against the Tamil people, and we are learning from our own from our own practice now. And that's why the field where we are based now is bringing the Kurds, the national unity amongst the Kurds, and then the regional unity amongst the people, means the Kurds, Arabs, Turks, Persians, the people, because I don't think the Turkish state, however, is committing genocidal policy against the Kurds, is not taking care on the Turkish people also, because Turks are also oppressed, particularly the Turkish worker class. All other components of Turkey also oppressed by this racist and sexist regime of the Turkish President Erdogan. So we are trying to bring all the together. We are acting with the Turkish trade unions since the worker class in Turkey is also oppressed. And the same we are doing in Iranian Kurdistan. There are Azeri people and a lot of other nations in Iran. We are trying to bring them together. This is the only option we have now in Middle East. And I think we are in the right move. And this alternative of the PKK, which is led by Abdullah Öcalan, is now seeking by NATO state as obstacle, because they say we want to destroy organized people. What we need is having corrupt regimes, corrupt states. Through them, we can control the whole area, because this area also important for natural resources, particularly the Kurdish region. Both parts of Kurdistan, Iraq and Syria are full of oil and gas, and also the Kurdish region is supplying the Arab world and Turkey with water. We have the two main rivers, Euphrates and Tigris. From this point, also the Kurdistan is important, and that's why Turkey is trying to occupy next to the Turkish part of Kurdistan, the northern part, to occupy Syria and Iraq, because Erdogan, the Turkish president, is saying, formerly this was the area of the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottomans, I have to take over the heritage of the Ottomans until 2023, because 2023 is the 100th anniversary of the Lausanne Treaty, which was the conference in Lausanne and drawn the map of the current Middle East, of the current nation states. And he wants to make use of the political vacuum in Middle East by occupying former territories of Ottoman Empire. That's why Turkey is in Libya, Turkey is involved in Yemen, Turkey is involved in Sudan, in Somalia, wherever Muslims are, in any state which has a Muslim community, Turkey is using them. And now, particularly since the uprisings of the Palestinians, Erdogan is supportive of the Palestinians, but killing the Kurds, saying Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians, but he himself is committing genocide against the Kurds. So this is the truth of the nation states, and we should be careful in this. And I think all the aggressive methods of Turkey is because Turkey is next to collapse. Turkish state with Turkish nationalism, Turkish fascism can't survive, since unless we Kurds doesn't get our rights of self-determination. And we wouldn't allow Turkey to occupy Syria or Iraqi Kurdistan. Erdogan clearly says, I want to get them back until 2023. This belongs to my father, the Ottoman Empire. And we say, no, you can't occupy our land. This is the current situation now in Kurdistan. And there's a change in the Kurdish society. There's national unity amongst the Kurdish people, and there's political awareness amongst the Kurds. We could prevent that Turkey and other, and particularly the US, could split the Kurdish politics by saying these are the good Kurds and then bad Kurds. We learn from our history, and we are trying to not repeat our failures in the history. That's why being tolerant in politics and national unity, it's important and vital to us, because the colonial powers are experts in policy of divide and rule. So, and we have to bring together. So we have to do the opposite of the global or the hegemonial policy. If they want to split, we have to bring together. So because coming together is the source of our strength as people. That's what we believe, and that's what we think is necessary for this century.
Thank you very much, Ms. Niloufer Koch, for speaking to us today on the Kurd struggle and the present situation, as well as the way forward. Thank you also for sharing your personal experiences and expressing your solidarity as well towards the Tamil genocide. We express our sincere thanks and appreciation for sharing and spending your time with us today. So with that, that concludes our speaker presentations, and we will now be moving on to our discussion and question and answer period. So we kindly ask that all our panelists today to please kindly turn on their videos. We also ask that all our attendees who have joined us, if you have any questions today from our conference, to please type them in the chat box, and also If you can indicate which panelists that you'd like to direct your question to, that would be very helpful as well.
Madam Chair, may I just make a brief comment?
Sure.
I just want to clarify that when I referred to armed struggle, I wasn't generalizing it to the legitimate armed struggles of the Kurdish people, people in Yemen, and even Palestine and elsewhere, and that it was specific to certain conditions on the ground in relation to Jaffna and the Tamil Elam areas. It's a tiny island that can never sustain an armed struggle because you will have complete annihilation, and it would be easy to wipe out the people as they've already started. So it's just in relation to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your clarification. Also, while we wait for any questions in our chat, if any of the panelists who have joined us today want to share any final thoughts or closing remarks before we end today, you're also very welcome to do so at this time.
I just wanted to say that I very much appreciated Krish Govender's very experienced and inspirational remarks on how South Africans struggle and their people were prepared to sacrifice everything, including their wages, for the benefit of their struggle, the sanctions, because we have also heard the same thing coming from rich white European policy makers who have absolutely no understanding or no connections with any struggle, saying that they are concerned about our people. I mean, like, they are living a high colonial life in Yangon and other places, and they have the gall to tell us that, you know, they care more about our brown people than, you know, us who are involved in this struggle for decades. And also, I want to thank this sister from, you know, Bremen, but I learned so much from your analysis. I think particularly the need to overcome racism, nationalism, because people have been pitted against one another despite religions and whatnot. And particularly we need to tolerate among diaspora struggles, and that is you know, really the takeaway for me. We have to tolerate differences and not backbite. Otherwise, we just strengthen the hands of the oppressor. And so thank you to both of you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mongsarni, for your final comments.
Well, if there's nobody going to say anything further, well, not further, but just whilst we're waiting, please interrupt me at any time. But I want to urge, especially the Tamil diaspora, to work on a program and to develop and identify 2 or 3 products from the island that we can call on all our friends, comrades, and all our organizations that share in solidarity with the Tamil struggle to start a small program of boycotting those products. And secondly, that we must start isolating in whatever way possible the Sri Lankan cricket team, which goes around playing cricket all over the world and is only representative of the Sinhalese and pretends that nothing has happened on the island. I say that because in South Africa, part of the anti-apartheid struggle, which was so successful all over the world with the solidarity groups, was that they isolated the rugby team, the cricket team, the football teams, and they kicked out South Africa from the International Olympic Committee and so forth. And those are things that go to the root of destroying the morale of the oppressor, especially those who don't understand the nature of the oppression, but they support the oppressors because they belong to a certain tribe or a color or a race. And these are steps that are possible. We may not succeed in overnight, but it will be wonderful if we came back in a year's time and said that the sales of these products from Sri Lanka have been terribly damaged. The cricket team is facing opposition now in certain areas, etc. So cultural, artistic, sporting, and economic action is very, very crucial. It's a basic way of mobilizing towards some productive outcome. Sanctions and economic sanctions, yes, if we can target a university in London or one in New York that has got any financial interest in Sri Lanka, we must identify them, go and confront them and expose them. I'm just saying, these are the ways we did it in South Africa. We got disinvestment from academic institutions, from banks. So you identify, if say Citibank in New York has got interest in Sri Lanka, call on people who have bank accounts there, our diaspora people, to withdraw accounts, make it public, and start a campaign that isolates one bank. Just take one bank and you start in that way. We did it in the same way as part of the South African struggle. I'll just stop there, but thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Krish Govinder. There's also a question in the chat box for you, actually. And the question is, if the United Nations is powerless, what are our options in proclaiming genocide?
Well, let me be very clear. The United Nations would not declare genocide out of their own free will. They don't have a free will. They have their veto powers of these super countries, these big, powerful nations that won't allow any progressive step to be taken on any of the struggles for self-determination. Even the Kurdish struggle, the Yemenis, the Western Sahrawi, all of them are facing, and look at Myanmar, you will not get endorsement from the UN on its own. It's the people's struggle and the solidarity that grows internationally that awakens the UN. The UN only awakens 5 years after genocide is completed. That is what happened in Rwanda. That is what's going on in Palestine. That's what has already happened in 2009. We are in 2021, and genocide cannot be put on the UN table because it's being pushed off. It is a sad reflection of that international body. So I would urge that it's the people of the world, our solidarity relationships and groups that support each other, that would, in one way or the other, declare these acts of genocide and war crimes. And we have developed some programs where people have been brought to trial through international tribunals set up by progressive groups with lawyers and lawyers organizations, social activist groups, and the groups that represent the people. So in theory, one can even say in the next year or two, Erdogan could be on trial for war crimes in relation to the Kurdish people. And we must start working towards that. Now, when you have a dossier prepared, you can then try to move the ICC through sympathetic nations to look at bringing charges. Now, the ICC does provide a glimmer of hope in that way. So I'm just merely saying that it is up to the liberation movements in all our countries to start preparing documents, I know that the case for genocide against the Tamil people has already been made and proven. There are hundreds of pages and pages of documents that have been scientifically and legally prepared that prove genocide. It's only a matter of saying, do we have the resources to hold a public trial, even if it's in London, of the war criminals? And that's how you focus, you create documents, it goes into history books, it goes into records, and when the right time comes, a good country may wake up and say, we will support a charge sheet to be taken to the ICC, and you start a program along those kind of lines. It's a long struggle, but it's a far more determined one, which does not rely on the United Nations. I just would park it at that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much for answering that question. So I think we have another question, and it can be answered by any of the panelists here. And the question is, what options are available for us through political and non-violence ways for Tamils to establish Tamil nation in the north and east of Sri Lanka?
I hope someone is going to answer that, but if please, someone can interrupt me, but I want to say, let's not forget the people on the ground in Tamil Eelam, in Jaffna. They are waging an internal struggle, which is not an easy one through the Tamil National Assembly there, the TNA. It is an organized form of democracy within the Sri Lankan regime and their governmental system, but it is a voice that allows people to reach out to its own community. We're not saying the members of the TNA are radical enough or very strong, but they are at the front line of the worst atrocities and a terrible regime, and we have to be partial to their ability to speak out because they will just get killed. But they are doing work, and our call must always be, from a political perspective, is for negotiations around issues of self-determination based on either an independent state or a federal system within the broad political system that's in place in Sri Lanka at the moment. So a fair and open federal system that will give a certain amount of independence to govern the Tamil state will allow people to then develop, to be given opportunities, to have proper housing, education, and the ability to administer their own areas. So a lot of that needs to be ironed out into some kind of program for internal action, which then can be supported by solidarity groups and even the diaspora. But the unity of the diaspora is a desperate, desperate need. We can't have 6 Mulay Baiko ceremonies going on in the world in 6 days. It just does not help. It just does not help. Thank you.
Thank you very
Can I
much.
say something?
Yes, please go ahead.
In the recent years, we lost 3 important regions to Turkey. And the Kurdish cities of Afrin, Giresun, Serikani was occupied by Turkey since 2019 until today. And then we lost the biggest Kurdish city, Kirkuk, in Iraq, to the central government of Iraq. After this kind of defeat, there's a need for us to be self-critical, to learn from our failures, not to breaking the will of the people. I think experiencing such a genocide which the Tamil people experience is, of course, a heavy break in the will of the people for resistance. That's why I think the politicians, the leading figures in the Tamil movement has to be very self-critical in front of the people for reorganizing the people. And I agree with Comrade Pish from South Africa, particularly organizing of the diaspora is very vital. Whenever there's a problem in Kurdistan, the Kurdish diaspora, whether from Iran, from Iraq, from Turkey, They played a key role as diplomats. So I think all the Tamils has to act like diplomats for their country, and disturbing the international organization by a permanent organizing of actions in front of the UN, like we do since 40 years. We have every day or every week action in front of the Council of Europe in Strasbourg, where Turkey is member, in Geneva, where the Human Rights Commissioner for Human Rights is based of the UN, and in other organizations. Now we are planning having actions in front of the NATO, since it's supporting Turkey for the anti-Kurdish war. So I think organizing the diaspora is very important, disturbing international politics through non-violent, democratic political activities. Mass mobilization in this manner is a source of power for diplomacy, I think. And second, I think we should also see that Sri Lanka has also competition, has conflicts with other states. In these, I think it's important also to find other states who will able to support the Tamils. Now in Kurdistan, we are looking who is in competition with Turkey. So this is important for us to look for the support of states when we want to act in United Nations, because United Nations take you serious if any state is speaking on your behalf. Since we are non-state actors, we can't say anything in the UN. They wouldn't listen to us. However, they have now reports about the Turkish crimes crimes against humanity in Syria. They by their own published reports, but nothing, none of sanctions implemented on Turkey. Just providing reports is not enough. But we are taking these reports to continue, and we have seen that not just us are fighting against Turkey, also other states are defeating Turkey for Turkish expansionism in the region, like the Arabs. We are now acting more with the Arabs, for example, since Turkey is involved in Yemen, in Libya, and other countries. So I think these opportunities in international politics amongst the states should be also one of the main pillar of our diplomacy, also for the Tamil people. I do believe that in the global competition between China, US, and other in the Indian Ocean, particularly for China, I think there are many opportunities also for the Tamils to be involved in diplomacy on this amongst the states. But for that, the people has to be firstly become a power. Again, that's why I think this is the vital part of the being taken serious by being taken in consideration needs that you have to become power. That is the organizing of your people.
Thank you very much, Ms. Luther Coach. And I'm just going to now ask Professor Sriranjan to speak. I believe he has his hand raised, so I'll pass it to him now.
Thank you for the opportunity. I just thought I will share for the benefit of the panelists who are from outside of Canada. Recently, last week, the Ontario Provincial Parliament passed a resolution, it's a bill actually, proclaiming May 11th to 18th as the Tamil Genocide Education Week. What it entails is that the school systems in Ontario now could organize lessons and stuff to highlight the plight of the Tamils during this week, which is accepted. So it took us a lot of effort. It was unanimously passed, and it has been proclaimed as a law in the provincial parliament. So we have been making awareness campaign on all fronts, and slowly we have been able to impress upon that. And of course, there's a group in Ontario that has filed a court case against it, and we welcome that court case because there'll be an opportunity for us to present our side of the story in a court of law. So we have thousands of witnesses we will bring forward, and then we will see what happens in the court of law. That'll be even better for us.
Great, thank you so much, Professor Sriranjan. Since that brings us to the end of the question and answer period and discussion. If we don't have any other closing remarks from any of our panelists, I think we'll bring today's conference to an end. I'd like to thank everyone who participated in today's global conference on solidarity with victims of genocide, hosted by the International Council of Ulam Tamils. We hope that you found all the academic and personal perspectives presented by our distinguished scholars, authors, columnists, and activists who joined from the international community on genocides across the globe educational today. Thank you very much to all our speakers who shared their knowledge, insights, and experiences with us. Special thanks also to the organizers of today's conference and also providing me with the opportunity to moderate. We hope today's conference will ensure such tragedies are never repeated and support long-term peace, justice, accountability, and reconciliation. Thank you, and hope you all have a nice rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Solidarity
Thank you.
to everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
See you all again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.